Today's story is from the Big Storybook for Children. Today it's going to be The Tale of Rapunzel. There was once a man and his wife who for many years had dearly wanted a child, but their wish was never granted. From the window of their tiny house, the woman could see the beautiful garden next door, which was surrounded by a high wall. No one ever went into this garden, for it belonged to an old witch who was greatly feared because of her strange magical powers. But one day, the woman saw a bed of rampion growing in the garden. It looked so lovely and fresh that the woman longed to have some to make herself a salad. So great was her desire that day after day she pleaded with her husband to go and get some rampion for her. Her husband feared the witch and refused, but as his wife grew pale and ill, he finally conquered his fear, and as night fell, he crept over the wall into the witch's garden. Quickly, the man picked a bunch of rampion and set off down the garden path, eager to get home safely. But suddenly a bony hand appeared on his shoulder, and a mocking voice cried, "It is a brave man indeed who dares to steal from me." The bright man looked up into the bright green eyes of the witch, and his heart filled with fear. Stumbling over the words, he poured out his story of how he feared for his wife's life if she could not have the rampion. Much to his surprise, he also found himself telling the witch how he and his wife longed for a child. The old witch heard the man out in silence, and then she said, with a sly smile, "Take the rampion to your good wife, and tell her that soon she will have the child she desires. But I claim that child for my own as payment for the rampion. Do not fear, for I shall look after the child as if she were my own, and you and your wife shall have other children to bring you joy. You have my word for it." The man would have promised anything to get away from the witch, and he agreed to her request at once. When he returned home, he told his wife all that the witch had said, and the witch's words came true. A lovely daughter was born to the couple, and the witch appeared immediately to claim the baby. She called the child Rapunzel and took the baby away. Until she was 12 years old, Rapunzel lived happily enough with the old witch, who cared for her as if she was her own daughter. But Rapunzel grew to be the most beautiful girl under the sun, and the witch became very jealous of her beauty. One day the witch shut Rapunzel up in a tall tower which had neither steps nor doors, but only a small window at the top. When the witch wanted to visit Rapunzel, she would stand at the bottom of the tower and cry, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." And when she heard the witch's voice, Rapunzel would unbind her long golden tresses, and, using this lovely hair as a ladder, the witch would climb up into the tower. Some 5 summers after the witch had first shut up Rapunzel in the magic tower, the king's son was riding through the wood, and he came upon the tower. Suddenly he heard someone singing so sweetly that he resolved to find out who it was. But try as he might, the prince could find no door through which to enter the tower. At last he had to return to the royal palace without finding out the owner of the sweet voice. But the prince could not forget the voice as sweet as the song of the nightingale, and each day he rode out into the forest to hear Rapunzel singing. One day, as he stood listening behind a tree, he saw the old witch come walking up. He watched in amazement as the witch called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel let down her tresses, and the witch mounted up. "So that is the ladder I must climb," murmured the prince to himself. "Tomorrow I shall try my luck." And the very next day the prince stood below the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The golden tresses fell down, and using this fine ladder the prince climbed up and saw Rapunzel for the very first time. He was quite overcome with her beauty, and he fell instantly in love with her. Rapunzel was very frightened when she saw the prince, but he spoke kindly and gently to her, telling the young maiden how her sweet voice had charmed him so that he had determined to see her. That she soon lost her fear. When the prince asked Rapunzel to marry him, the young maiden was filled with joy, and she quickly learned that he was both good and kind and extremely handsome. She readily agreed to become the prince's wife, thinking how lucky she was finally going to be to escape from the old witch. "If you bring me a skein of silk each time you visit me every day, I will weave them into a silken ladder," promised Rapunzel. "When it is ready I will come down by it, and we will ride away together on your horse." The prince thought that was an excellent plan, and he resolved only to come at dusk when he knew that the witch was safely away from the tower. All went well, and the silken rope grew stronger every day. But just before it was finished, as the witch reached the top of the tower one day, Rapunzel said thoughtlessly, "Oh, you are much heavier to draw up than the king's son." "Oh, you wicked child, how have you deceived me?" raged the old witch. She seized Rapunzel's golden hair, and drawing a pair of scissors from her pocket, she cut off all the beautiful tresses until they lay in a golden heap on the floor. Then, using her magical powers once again, she spirited poor Rapunzel far away into a lonely desert, leaving the poor girl quite alone in her misery and grief. That evening, when the prince came to carry off Rapunzel, he called out as usual, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Down came the golden tresses, but when he reached the top, the prince saw not his sweetheart, but the wicked witch, who gazed at him with scornful eyes. "Your golden maiden sings no longer in her nest," the witch cackled. "The cat has taken your beautiful singing bird away. Now I will scratch out your eyes. Rapunzel is lost to you forever, and you will never see her again." Upon hearing the witch's cruel words, the prince gave a cry of despair and flung himself from the top of the tower. He escaped with his life, for a large bush broke his fall, but thorns tore at his eyes, blinding him. His heart was full of sorrow for his lost love. The prince stumbled about the forest. Unable to see, he could not return to the palace, and for the next few years he lived as best he could, eating berries and roots, drinking from streams, and sleeping beneath the stars, whose beauty he could no longer see. Then one day the kind fates led him into the desert where Rapunzel dwelt. The beautiful maiden still sang, but now her songs were sad as she sang of the prince she had loved. Hearing her sweet voice once again, the prince called out Rapunzel's name. Recognizing his voice, Rapunzel ran to meet him, and as she kissed him tenderly, two of her joyful tears moistened his eyes, and they became very clear again, and he could see just as well as ever. Together they hurried away from the desolate desert, and after many weeks they returned to the prince's kingdom. Here they were greeted with great joy, for the prince had long ago been given up for lost. Rapunzel's beauty and sweetness of nature won all hearts, and the old king readily consented to the marriage of Rapunzel to his son. Rapunzel's true parents were honored guests at the royal wedding, and the prince and his bride began a long and happy life together. As for the old witch, she completely disappeared and was never seen again, ever.